The cantina on Nexus Station reeked of fermented algae and disappointment. Marcus Chen sat hunched over his third glass of synthetic whiskey, watching the amber liquid swirl as conversations flowed around him in a dozen alien languages. To anyone looking, he appeared to be just another washed-up human trying to drink away his problems in the galaxy's most notorious trading hub. The Zephyrian bartender, a tall creature with crystalline skin that shifted colors with his mood, glanced at Marcus with what might have been pity. His skin flickered from blue to a dull gray as he cleaned glasses with 4 of his 6 arms. "Another round, human?" the bartender asked, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus shook his head and placed a few credit chips on the scarred metal bar. "I'm good, Veltar, thanks." As he stood to leave, a commotion erupted near the entrance. 3 Karathi soldiers strutted in, their black chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh neon lights. The insectoid warriors were known throughout the sector for their brutality, and their recent conquest of the Terran colony on Barum, Kepler 442b. The cantina fell silent except for the nervous clicking of claws and tentacles. The lead Karathi, distinguished by the red markings on his carapace, scanned the room with compound eyes before fixing his gaze on Marcus. A sound that might have been laughter emerged from his mandibles. "Look what we have here," the soldier said in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "A human. Tell me, little mammal, were you perhaps one of the brave defenders of Kepler 442b? Did you run like the rest of your pathetic species when real warriors arrived?" Marcus turned slowly, his weathered face showing no emotion. He was average height for a human, with graying hair and clothes that had seen better decades. Nothing about him suggested he was anything more than a middle-aged drifter. "Never been to Kepler 442b, Marcus replied quietly. "Sorry to disappoint you." The Karathi clicked his mandibles in amusement. "Disappoint? No, human. Your kind stopped disappointing us long ago. We expect nothing from you now." He stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell the pheromones of aggression emanating from the alien's carapace. The great human military? Once you controlled half the galaxy, yes? Now look at you, scattered, broken, hiding in places like this. Other patrons shifted uncomfortably. The history was well known throughout the sector. Humanity had once been a formidable force, controlling vast territories and commanding respect through military might. The Terran Federation had stood as equals among the galaxy's great powers, but that was before the Zarathi War. 25 years ago, the psychic Zarathi Empire had launched a devastating assault on human space. The war had lasted 3 brutal years, ending with humanity's crushing defeat. The Terran Federation had collapsed. Human colonies were abandoned or conquered, and the survivors scattered to the outer rim. Most species viewed humans as a broken people, their military traditions nothing but faded glory. "The Zarathi showed everyone your true nature," the Karathi continued, now addressing the entire cantina. "Weak, ineffective. Your legendary tactics and strategies were myths. Your weapons and ships inferior. When faced with real power, humans crumbled like sand." A few patrons murmured agreement. The Karathi's companions flanked him, their weapons clearly visible. This wasn't just casual racism. They were looking for a fight. Marcus sighed and finished his drink. "You're entitled to your opinion." "Opinion?" The lead Karathi's voice rose. "Facts, human. Your species is finished. The galaxy has moved on without you." He gestured to his companions. "We have claimed 14 former human colonies in the past year alone. Your people barely fight back anymore. They know they are beaten." The cantina's patrons watched with morbid fascination. Fights between different species were common enough on Nexus Station, but there was something different about this confrontation. The human seemed completely unfazed by the intimidating aliens towering over him. "You know what the most pathetic part is?" The Karathi pressed on. "Humans used to tell stories about your great war heroes, names that supposedly struck fear across the galaxy. But where are they now? Dead, hiding? Probably drunk in places like this, trying to forget how badly they failed." Marcus placed his empty glass on the bar with a soft clink. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, but a kind of tired sadness that seemed to carry the weight of years. "You're right about one thing," Marcus said softly. "Some of those old soldiers do end up in places like this." The Karathi leaned in closer, sensing victory. "Did you know any of them, little human? Any of these so-called heroes?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. his fingers drumming absently on the bar. The entire cantina held its breath. Even Veltar had stopped cleaning glasses, his crystalline skin shifting to a nervous purple. "I knew a few," Marcus finally said. "Good people. They did their best." "Their best?" The Karathi's laughter was like breaking glass. "Their best resulted in the greatest military humiliation in galactic history. Millions of humans dead or enslaved. An entire civilization reduced to refugees and drifters." "Yes," Marcus agreed quietly. "A lot of good people died." The simple acknowledgement seemed to deflate some of the Karathi's momentum. He had been expecting anger, defiance, something he could respond to with violence. Instead, he found only tired acceptance, but his companions were growing restless. The second Karathi, younger and more aggressive, stepped forward. "Enough talk. This human shows no respect. Perhaps we should teach him some." The third soldier was already reaching for his weapon. The cantina's other patrons began backing away, recognizing the signs of impending violence. Nexus Station security was notoriously slow to respond, especially in the lower levels where the cantina was located. Marcus looked at the three warriors surrounding him and sighed again. "You really don't want to do this, and why is that, old man?" The young Karathi snarled. What could one broken human possibly do to three Karathi warriors? Marcus stood up slowly, his movements casual and unthreatening. He was several inches shorter than the smallest Karathi, and looked like he hadn't seen combat in decades. But as he straightened, something subtle changed in his posture. The way he balanced his weight, the angle of his shoulders, the positioning of his hands. Veltar, who had been tending bar on Nexus Station for over 40 years, and had seen every kind of fighter the galaxy had to offer, suddenly went very still. His crystalline skin shifted from purple to deep red. "Gentlemen," Veltar said carefully, "perhaps this isn't—" "Silence," the lead Karathi snapped. "This doesn't concern you, Crystal Skin." Marcus looked around the cantina one more time, his gaze lingering on the other patrons who were now pressed against the walls. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My name is Marcus Chen. Some of you older folks might remember that name." The effect was immediate and electric. Veltar's skin went completely white. Several of the older alien patrons gasped audibly. Even the Karathi hesitated, their compound eyes narrowing as they processed the name. In the sudden silence, Marcus rolled his shoulders and smiled sadly. "Hello, boys. Ready to learn some history?" The lead Karathi's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "Marcus Chen? The name means nothing to me, human." But his companions were backing away, their confident postures suddenly uncertain. The younger Karathi's hand moved away from his weapon as if it had burned him. "Commander," the third soldier whispered in their native language, "we should leave." Veltar's crystalline skin was now shifting rapidly between colors, a sign of extreme agitation. "You fools," he said to the Karathi in a voice like breaking wind chimes. "Do you know nothing of galactic military history?" Around the cantina, the older patrons were edging toward the exits. A grizzled Tandoshan smuggler grabbed his Volantian partner's arm and pulled him toward the door. "We leave. Now," he hissed. Marcus remained perfectly still, his hands at his sides. But there was something different about him now. The tired, defeated posture was gone, replaced by the coiled readiness of a predator. It was as if decades had fallen away, revealing the warrior beneath. 28 years ago, Veltar continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent cantina, the hegemony of Kral launched an assault on the Centauri trade routes. 50,000 Kralshan warriors in 100 warships. They had never been defeated in battle. The lead Karathi's eyes widened slightly. Every military officer in the galaxy knew that story. "The humans sent one ship," Veltar went on. "A modified cruiser called the Retribution. 500 crew members against 50,000. The battle lasted 4 hours. Marcus smiled grimly. 3 hours and 42 minutes, actually. But who's counting? When it was over, Veltar's voice dropped to a whisper. 96 Kralshan ships were destroyed or disabled. The hegemony's entire fleet broken by a single human vessel. The man who planned and executed that victory was Captain Marcus Chen. The younger Karathi took another step back. That's impossible. 1 ship against 100? The numbers don't lie, interrupted an aged Saurian merchant who had been quietly nursing a drink in the corner. His scaled face bore the scars of a dozen conflicts. "I was there, serving on a Kralshan destroyer. I saw what the humans did to us. Marcus turned to look at the old soldier, his expression softening slightly.
Kethmore.
Is that you? The Saurian nodded slowly. Hello, Marcus. It has been many years. Too many, Marcus replied. How's the family? Growing. My youngest grandson just hatched last month. Kethmore's eyes never left the Karathi as he spoke. He will learn about human warfare in his military studies, about the Battle of Centauri. About you. The lead Karathi's confidence was visibly cracking. Even if this is true, that was decades ago. Before the Zarathi War. Before humans were broken. Marcus's expression darkened. You keep using that word, broken. Because it's accurate, the Karathi said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. The Zarathi crushed your federation. Your military was shattered. Your colonies scattered. You cannot deny this. No, Marcus said quietly. I can't deny it. The Zarathi did terrible things to my people. We lost planets. We lost fleets. We lost... He paused, his eyes distant. We lost everything that mattered. The Karathi straightened slightly, sensing vindication. Then you admit... I admit we lost the war, Marcus interrupted. What I don't admit is that we were broken. He took a step forward, and despite being the smaller species, the Karathi instinctively stepped back. You want to know about the Zarathi War? Marcus's voice carried an edge now, sharp as a blade. I'll tell you about the Zarathi War. When they invaded human space, they brought 12 million ships. 12 million. The largest armada in galactic history. The cantina was utterly silent now. Even the background hum of the station's life support seemed muted. They had psychic weapons that could drive entire crews insane. They had technology that made their ships nearly invisible to our sensors. They had numbers that made our fleets look like children's toys. Marcus's eyes found each of the Karathi in turn. And you know what happened? You lost, the lead Karathi said, but his voice was uncertain. We held them for 3 years, Marcus said simply. 3 years. 12 million ships against maybe 50,000 human vessels at our peak. And we held them for 3 years. Kethmore nodded slowly. The entire galaxy watched. Most species would have fallen in weeks against such a force. The Altarians lasted 6 days, Veltar added. The Karathi Confederation surrendered after 2 weeks. The lead Karathi spun toward the bartender. The Karathi never surrendered to the Zarathi. No, Veltar agreed. Because by the time they reached your space, the humans had already bled them white. 12 million ships became 8 million, then 6 million, then 4. By the time the war ended, the Zarathi had lost more ships to humans than they had to every other species in galactic history combined. Marcus moved closer to the bar, his movements fluid and controlled. The funny thing about that war, everyone remembers that we lost. Nobody talks about what it cost them to beat us. The Zarathi Empire collapsed within 5 years of their victory, Kethmore observed. Overextended, economically ruined, their military broken by the cost of defeating humanity. But you still lost, the younger Karathi said desperately. Your federation is gone. Your colonies were abandoned. Your people are scattered. Our government fell, Marcus corrected. Our territory was conquered. Our military was disbanded. He was close enough now that the Karathi could probably smell his breath. But our people? Our knowledge? Our ability to fight? He smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it. That doesn't just disappear. The third Karathi soldier, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. Commander, we should leave. Now. But the lead Karathi's pride wouldn't let him back down completely. Even if all of this is true, you are one man. An old man. What could you possibly do against 3 warriors in their prime? Marcus considered this for a moment. You know, that's a fair question. I am getting older. Reflexes aren't what they used to be. Haven't been in a real fight in, maybe 6 months now. The casual mention of recent combat sent another ripple of unease through the room. But here's the thing about humans, Marcus continued conversationally. We don't really retire from being warriors. We just get better at it. Without warning, his hand moved to his jacket. The motion was so fast that it seemed to blur. Before any of the Karathi could react, Marcus was holding something small and metallic. Gravitational pulse grenade, he said calmly. Military grade. One of these can collapse the artificial gravity in a 50-meter radius. Very messy in a space station. He looked around the cantina thoughtfully. Probably bring down half this level. The Karathi were frozen, their hands hovering near their weapons but not daring to draw them. Now, I could throw this, Marcus continued, and in the 3 seconds before it detonates, probably kill all 3 of you with my bare hands. The explosion would take out most of the other people in here too. But honestly, after some of the places I've been, collateral damage doesn't keep me up at night anymore. His voice remained perfectly calm, as if he were discussing the weather. Or, he said, you could walk away. Go back to your ship. Tell your friends you met an old human who was probably drunk and definitely not worth the trouble. Live to fight another day. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Finally, the lead Karathi stepped back. This is not over, human. Marcus shrugged. It is if you want it to be. But if you really want to test your luck against someone who helped design half the tactics your military academies still teach. He let the sentence hang in the air. The 3 Karathi exchanged glances. Their earlier bravado completely evaporated. Without another word, they turned and strode toward the exit, their armor clanking with each step. As the cantina door sealed behind them, Marcus calmly put the device back inside his jacket. The tension in the room began to ease, but slowly. Was that really a gravitational pulse grenade? Veltar asked. Marcus smiled and pulled the object out again. It was a worn metal flask, emergency bourbon, he said. Never know when you might need it. The cantina erupted in nervous laughter. But Marcus was already heading for the door. Outside, in the station's corridors, he could hear the Karathi arguing amongst themselves as they walked away. Told you we should have researched the target. Just an old human, you said. Marcus Chen, you idiots. The butcher of Kepler Prime. Marcus paused. It had been a long time since anyone had called him that. Some names, he reflected, you never really escaped. Marcus made his way through the winding corridors of Nexus Station's lower levels, past the flickering advertisements in languages he didn't recognize, and the vendors hawking everything from synthetic organs to stolen starship codes. The encounter in the cantina had stirred up memories he preferred to keep buried, but it had also reminded him why he was here. His small quarters were in Section 7, Level C, not the worst part of the station, but far from the best. The room was barely large enough for a sleeping alcove, a small desk, and a tiny food processor. To most observers, it would look like the desperate living situation of a man down on his luck. They wouldn't notice the reinforced walls, the hidden weapon caches, or the sophisticated communication array disguised as an old entertainment system. Marcus activated his security protocols and sat down at the desk. The surface appeared blank, but his fingerprint activated a holographic interface that rose silently from the desktop. Encrypted messages appeared in the air before him, each one bearing the subtle markers that identified them as coming from the network. Most people assumed that the collapse of the Terran Federation had meant the end of human military intelligence. They were wrong. When the government fell and the fleet scattered, the intelligence services had simply gone underground. The network had no official existence, no central command structure, no traceable assets. It was composed entirely of former military personnel, scientists, and civilians who had refused to accept defeat. Marcus scrolled through the messages, his expression growing darker with each one. Reports from across the galaxy painted a consistent picture. Human colonies under increasing pressure, refugee ships being raided with impunity, and the various galactic powers growing bolder in their treatment of scattered human populations. But it was the last message that made him pause. The sender was listed only as Phoenix, but Marcus knew the code. Admiral Sarah Voss had been presumed dead for 15 years, killed when her flagship was destroyed during the final battle of the Zerathi War. Apparently, reports of her death had been greatly exaggerated. The message was brief. Chen, need to meet, urgent. The Wanderer, Dock 47, Bay 12. Come alone. Old friends waiting. Marcus studied the message for several minutes, running through the possibilities. It could be a trap. The Karathi from the cantina might have been smarter than they appeared. But the authentication codes were correct, and only a handful of people knew the specific phrases that would identify this as legitimate. He stood and moved to a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was an assortment of weapons and equipment that would have been worth more than most freighter captains earned in a year. Marcus selected carefully: a military-grade sidearm, a vibroblade, several types of grenades that were definitely not filled with bourbon, and a tactical vest that looked like ordinary civilian clothing but could stop most small arms fire. 20 minutes later, He was walking through the commercial docking bays, trying to look like just another passenger looking for transport. Dock 47 was in the mid-range section of the station, where legitimate merchants and small shipping companies operated. Bay 12 housed a modified cargo hauler called the Wanderer, exactly the kind of ship that wouldn't attract unwanted attention. As he approached the ship, Marcus noted the subtle signs that marked it as more than it appeared. The hull plating was military grade. The sensor array was more sophisticated than any cargo ship needed, and there were weapon ports that had been skillfully disguised as maintenance hatches. The airlock opened before he could announce himself, and a familiar voice called out from inside. "About time, Marcus. We were starting to think you'd gone soft." Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison stepped into view, grinning broadly. He looked older than Marcus remembered, grayer hair, more lines around the eyes, but he still carried himself with the easy confidence of a professional soldier. "Jimmy," Marcus said, returning the smile despite himself. "You look terrible. You're not exactly a recruiting poster yourself, old friend." Marcus followed Morrison into the ship, noting the crew members he passed in the corridors. They were all human, all carried themselves like military personnel, and all tried to look like ordinary civilians. The Wanderer was obviously more than a simple cargo hauler. The ship's main conference room had been modified to serve as a command center. Holographic displays showed star charts, shipping routes, and what looked like military intelligence reports. And sitting at the head of the table was a woman Marcus had thought he would never see again. Admiral Sarah. Voss looked exactly like someone who had been presumed dead for 15 years and had spent that time fighting an underground war. Her red hair was streaked with gray. Her face bore the scars of combat, and her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much. But when she saw Marcus, she smiled with genuine warmth. "Hello, Marcus. It's good to see you." "Sarah." Marcus took the seat across from her, studying her face. "I have to admit, when I got your message, I wasn't sure whether to believe it." The feeling was mutual. "Last I heard, you were drinking yourself to death on some outer rim station." "Only on weekends," Marcus replied. "What's this about, Sarah? And who's we?" Voss gestured to the other people in the room. Marcus recognized most of them. Former Federation officers, intelligence operatives, special forces soldiers. People who were supposed to be dead, retired, or broken. "The network has been watching developments across human space," Voss began. "Things are getting worse. The Karathi have taken another colony. The Velshani are protecting human settlements by essentially enslaving the populations. And the hegemony of Kral is demanding tribute from any human ship that passes through their territory." Marcus nodded. "I've been seeing the reports. But this isn't new, Sarah. It's been going on for years." "What's new," Morrison interjected, "is that they're getting organized about it. The various powers have been meeting, discussing the human problem. They're talking about a final solution." The phrase sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "Genocide?" "Not exactly," Voss said. "More like permanent subjugation. They want to round up all the scattered human populations, relocate them to a handful of supervised worlds, and essentially turn us into a client species. No more independent human settlements. No more human ships traveling freely. No more network." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "How credible is this intelligence?" "Very," said a new voice from the doorway. Marcus turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Federation's former head of xenopsychology. She looked tired but determined. "I've been monitoring communications between the various governments. They're calling it the Terran Containment Protocol. The preliminary agreements are already in place. The good news," Voss continued, "is that they haven't implemented it yet. They're still arguing about the details, who gets which human populations, how to divide the resources, that sort of thing. And the bad news? The bad news is that they plan to begin implementation within 6 months. Starting with the outer rim colonies and working their way inward." Marcus studied the faces around the table. These were people he had served with, fought beside, trusted with his life. If they said the threat was real, it was real. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" "What I've always wanted from you, Marcus." "The impossible." Voss activated a holographic display showing a star map of the galaxy. "We want you to help us stop them." "With what army?" "The Federation is gone. Our fleets are scattered. Most humans don't even know this is coming." "We don't need an army," Morrison said. "We need what we've always been good at. Asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run tactics, making the enemy pay such a high price for victory that they decide it's not worth it. You're talking about terrorism. I'm talking about survival, Voss replied sharply. They want to put humanity in chains, Marcus. They want to turn us into pets. I'm talking about making sure that doesn't happen. Marcus looked around the room again. He counted 12 people, including himself. 13 people against the combined fleets of half the galaxy. 13 people who know how to fight, Vasquez corrected. 13 people who have access to resources, intelligence, and most importantly, the element of surprise. They think we're beaten, Morrison added. They think we're broken and scattered and helpless. They're not watching for us anymore. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the star map. Finally he spoke. What's the plan? Voss smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young admiral who had once commanded a battle fleet. We're going to remind them why they were afraid of humans in the first place. She touched a control, and the star map zoomed in on a particular system. The Karathi are moving a military convoy through the Rigel sector next week. 50 ships carrying the equipment and personnel to occupy 3 human colonies. It's heavily defended, well-planned, and they consider it routine. Marcus studied the tactical display. You want to hit a 50-ship convoy with 13 people? No, Voss said. I want to destroy it. Completely. I want to send a message to every government in the galaxy that humanity is still dangerous. That's suicide. Maybe. But if we pull it off, it changes everything. Suddenly we're not beaten refugees anymore. We're a threat they have to take seriously. Marcus looked around the table one more time. These people were asking him to essentially declare war on half the galaxy. It was insane, impossible, and woo. The holographic display showed the Rigel sector in perfect detail. Shipping lanes, gravitational anomalies, asteroid fields, and the precise route the Karathi convoy would take. Marcus studied it with the intensity of a man whose life depended on understanding every nuance of the battlefield. The convoy will be traveling in standard formation, Morrison explained, highlighting the ships with different colors, 12 cargo vessels carrying occupation equipment, 20 fighters for escort, 15 destroyers for heavy protection, and 3 battle cruisers as command ships. What kind of equipment? Marcus asked. Dr. Vasquez activated another display. Surveillance drones, population control systems, administrative computers, and enough heavy weapons to suppress any resistance on the target colonies. Everything they need to turn 3 independent human settlements into prison camps. Marcus nodded grimly. The colonies in question, New Geneva, Port Anderson, and Harmony Station, had populations totaling nearly 2 million people. If the Karathi plan succeeded, it would be the largest forced relocation of humans since the Zarathi War. Intelligence suggests they're not expecting any resistance, Voss continued. The colonies have minimal defensive capabilities, and the Karathi believe all human military assets in the sector were neutralized years ago. Were they? Marcus asked. Morrison smiled. Officially, yes. Unofficially, there are quite a few former Federation personnel living quietly on those worlds. They just need someone to coordinate them. Marcus studied the tactical display more carefully. What assets do we have available? The Wanderer and 2 other ships of similar capability, Voss replied. 47 personnel total, all former military, plus whatever local resources we can mobilize on the colonies themselves. 47 people against 50 ships, Marcus mused. I've faced worse odds. Not by much, Morrison pointed out. The key is not fighting them directly, Vasquez said. We can't win a conventional engagement, but we don't need to. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Explain. Voss touched a control and the display zoomed in on a section of the convoy route. The Karathi will be passing through the Cerberus asteroid field. It's a navigational hazard that requires ships to travel in single file through a narrow corridor. Their formation will be stretched out over several hundred kilometers. Classic ambush territory, Marcus observed. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. The display showed energy readings throughout the asteroid field. The field is rich in trilithium deposits. Very unstable trilithium. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. You want to turn the asteroid field into a minefield? Better than that, Morrison said, grinning. We want to turn it into the biggest improvised explosive device in galactic history. Dr. Vasquez activated another hologram showing molecular structures. Trilithium becomes extremely volatile when exposed to specific types of radiation. A properly calibrated pulse could trigger a chain reaction throughout the entire field. The explosion would be visible from 3 star systems away, Voss added, and it would vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. Marcus studied the plan, running calculations in his head. The timing would have to be perfect, and you'd need someone to manually trigger the reaction from inside the field. That's where you come in, Morrison said quietly. The room fell silent. Marcus looked around the table, seeing the mix of hope and desperation in their faces. They were asking him to essentially commit suicide for the chance to strike a blow against their enemies. You know it's a one-way trip, he said finally. Not necessarily, Voss replied. We've run the numbers. If the triggering device is placed correctly and the pilot has a fast enough ship, there's maybe a 10% chance of survival, Marcus finished. Assuming everything goes perfectly. The alternative is watching 2 million humans get enslaved, Morrison said, and letting the galaxy know that we won't fight back anymore. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, staring at the tactical display. Finally, he spoke. What about the colonies? Even if we destroy the convoy, the Karathi will just send another one. That's phase 2, Voss said. Once we've demonstrated that attacking human settlements carries a real cost, we open negotiations. Not as defeated refugees, but as equals. We make it clear that any attempt to implement the Terran Containment Protocol will result in a war that nobody wants. And if they don't believe us, then we make them believe us, Morrison said grimly. One destroyed convoy at a time. Marcus looked around the room again. You're all insane. You know that, right? Probably, Voss agreed. But we're the right kind of insane for this job. Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond Nexus Station. Somewhere out there, 2 million humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their freedom would soon be decided by 13 people in a stolen cargo hauler. I need to know something, he said without turning around. This network of yours, how many people are we talking about? How many humans are still willing to fight? More than you might think, Vasquez replied. We've identified active cells on 47 worlds, maybe 3,000 people total, all former military or intelligence. They're just waiting for someone to give them a target. 3,000, Marcus repeated. Against how many? The combined military forces of the species supporting the containment protocol? Maybe 10 million ships, 1 billion soldiers. Morrison's voice was matter-of-fact, but most of them won't be involved in the initial implementation. We'd be facing maybe 1,000 ships spread across dozens of operations. Still terrible odds. The best kind, Voss said with a slight smile. Remember the Battle of Thermopylae, Marcus. Sometimes the right kind of defeat can be more valuable than victory. Marcus turned back to face the group. You're not planning to just make a statement, are you? You actually think we can win this? I think we can make the cost high enough that they'll reconsider, Voss replied. And in the meantime, we buy time for something else. Which is? Dr. Vasquez activated one final holographic display. This one showed a star chart with numerous systems highlighted in blue. While we're conducting our resistance campaign, we're also evacuating human populations from the most vulnerable colonies, moving them to systems outside the major powers' sphere of influence, creating new settlements in unexplored regions. A human diaspora, Marcus said, understanding. Exactly. Even if they eventually defeat us, there will still be independent human communities scattered throughout the galaxy. Communities that know how to fight, how to hide, how to survive. Marcus studied the evacuation plan, noting the careful selection of target systems and the logistics involved. This is more than just a military operation. You're talking about preserving human civilization itself. That's always been the real objective, Voss said. The convoy operation is just the opening move. Marcus returned to his seat, his decision made. All right, I'm in. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I plan the tactical aspects of the convoy operation. No committee decisions, no second guessing. When it comes to the actual fighting, what I say goes. Voss nodded. Agreed. Second, we need better intelligence on Karathi military procedures. If we're going to pull this off, I need to know exactly how they'll react when things go wrong. I can help with that, Morrison said. I've been studying their tactics for years. Third, once this is over, assuming I survive, I want full access to network resources. If we're really going to fight a guerrilla war against half the galaxy, we need better coordination than this. Done, Voss said immediately. Marcus looked around the table one more time. When do we leave? 6 hours, Morrison replied. The convoy enters the asteroid field in 4 days. We need to be in position. Then we'd better get started. Marcus stood, feeling more energized than he had in years. I'll need detailed specifications on all our ships and personnel. And someone needs to contact the colonies, quietly, and let them know help is coming. As the meeting broke up and people began filing out of the conference room, Voss caught Marcus's arm. Are you sure about this? I meant what I said about the survival odds. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young captain who had once faced impossible odds and won. Sarah, I've been waiting 25 years for a chance to hit back. 10% odds are better than I usually get. As he left the conference room, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since the fall of the Federation. Hope. Not just for survival, but for victory. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had once been feared, and Marcus Chen was going to remind them personally. The Cerberus asteroid field stretched across space like a graveyard of shattered worlds, chunks of rock and metal tumbling slowly in the weak gravity of a distant red dwarf star. Navigation through the field required precise timing and careful planning, exactly the kind of restricted corridor that made convoys vulnerable. Marcus floated in the cockpit of his modified fighter, the Retribution 2, watching the Karathi convoy approach through the field's outer edge. The ship was a work of art disguised as scrap metal, built by network engineers who understood that sometimes the best weapons were the ones your enemy didn't recognize as threats. Target acquisition confirmed, came Morrison's voice through the encrypted comm channel. 50 ships moving in standard formation, right on schedule. The Wanderer and her 2 sister ships were positioned at strategic points around the asteroid field, hidden among the larger rocks and masked by the trilithium deposit's natural interference. Marcus's fighter was deep inside the field itself, next to the largest concentration of trilithium, the trigger point for their improvised weapon. Karathi lead elements entering the field now, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the reconnaissance ship Shadow. Fighters first, followed by destroyers, then the cargo vessels and command ships. Marcus checked his instruments one more time. The device he carried was deceptively simple, a modified quantum resonator that would destabilize the trilithium's molecular structure and trigger a chain reaction throughout the asteroid field. Dr. Vasquez had called it elegant. Marcus preferred to think of it as the biggest bomb in the galaxy. All teams report status, he said quietly. Wanderer in position. Ready for Phase 2. Ghost ready. Targeting systems locked on convoy flanks. Shadow maintaining overwatch. No sign they've detected us. Marcus smiled grimly. The Karathi were following their standard procedures exactly. Fighters screening ahead, destroyers providing protection, cargo ships staying safely in the middle of the formation. They had no idea that the asteroid field itself was about to become their enemy. Initiate Phase 1, Marcus ordered. The first phase was psychological. At precise intervals, explosions began erupting throughout the asteroid field. Not large, enough to damage the convoy ships, but dramatic enough to get their attention. To Karathi sensors, it would look like natural trilithium instabilities, the kind of minor hazard that made asteroid navigation dangerous, but not impossible. Karathi convoy is slowing, Kim reported. They're running additional scans of the field. Let them scan, Marcus replied. They won't find anything they don't expect to find. The explosions continued, each one carefully calculated to increase Karathi nervousness without triggering an immediate withdrawal. Marcus watched the convoys. Formation began to tighten as the ships moved closer together for mutual protection. Perfect. Phase 1 complete, Morrison announced. Karathi formation is now compressed to optimal density. Marcus activated his ship's targeting system and painted the lead Karathi battlecruiser with an invisible laser designator. All teams, prepare for Phase 2. Once this starts, we have maybe 5 minutes before their reinforcements arrive. Copy that. Standing by. Marcus took a deep breath and triggered the quantum resonator. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the asteroid nearest to his ship began to glow with an eerie blue light. The glow spread to the next asteroid, then the next, racing through the field like wildfire. Holy hell, someone whispered over the comm channel. The trilithium chain reaction engulfed the entire asteroid field in seconds, turning millions of tons of rock into superheated plasma. The explosion was so bright that Marcus's fighter automatically polarized its viewports to protect his vision. The lead elements of the Karathi convoy simply vanished, vaporized by temperatures that could melt starship armor in milliseconds. The ships behind them had perhaps 2 seconds to realize what was happening before the expanding wall of energy reached them. Marcus gunned his engines and dove toward the edge of the explosion, riding the shockwave like a surfer on a tsunami. His ship's shields screamed warnings as radiation levels spiked beyond safe parameters, but the little fighter held together. Behind him, 50 Karathi ships died in the largest non-nuclear explosion in recorded galactic history. Retribution. Report status. Morrison's voice was tight with concern. Still alive, Marcus replied, checking his instruments. His ship had taken significant damage, but nothing that would prevent him from fighting. Beginning Phase 3. Phase 3 was cleanup. As the explosion faded, Marcus could see the remnants of the convoy, a handful of ships that had been far enough from the main formation to survive the initial blast. They were damaged, disoriented, and completely unprepared for what came next. The Wanderer and her sister ships emerged from their hiding places like wolves attacking a wounded prey animal. Their weapons were military-grade, carefully maintained and upgraded over the years by network engineers. Against the surviving Karathi ships, they were devastatingly effective. "Target the command ship," Marcus ordered, diving toward a damaged Karathi cruiser. "Don't let them get a message out." His fighters' weapons were designed for precision rather than overwhelming firepower. Marcus put 3 quantum torpedoes into the cruiser's communication array, then strafed its bridge with particle beams. The ship listed to one side and began venting atmosphere. Around the battlefield, the other network ships were methodically destroying the convoy survivors. The Karathi had been trained for conventional warfare, not for this kind of lightning assault by enemies they hadn't seen coming. "All hostile ships neutralized," Kim reported. "No survivors." Marcus surveyed the battlefield. Where 50 Karathi ships had been 5 minutes ago, there was now only debris and the slowly fading glow of cooling plasma. It was, by any measure, a complete victory. "Phase 4, Morrison announced. "Time to leave." The network ships began withdrawing from the area, using different routes to avoid detection. But Marcus remained in place, studying the destruction. "Marcus, we need to go." Voss's voice came over the comm. "Karathi reinforcements will be here soon." "I know," Marcus replied, "but I want them to find something." He maneuvered his fighter close to the largest piece of wreckage, a section of hull plating from one of the destroyed cargo ships. Using his ship's manipulator arms, he carefully attached a small device to the metal. "What are you doing?" Morrison asked. "Leaving a calling card," Marcus said. The device was a simple holographic projector, programmed with a specific message. When the Karathi investigators found it, they would see a recording of Marcus himself, sitting calmly in his fighter's cockpit. "My name is Marcus Chen," the recording would say. 25 years ago, your people thought humanity was finished. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now. This convoy was just the beginning. Every ship you send against human settlements, every attempt to implement your containment protocol, will be met with appropriate force. You wanted a war? Congratulations. You have one. The recording would end with the symbol of the old Terran Federation, a reminder of what humanity had been and what it could be again. Marcus finished attaching the device and activated his engines. "All right, I'm done. Let's go home." As his fighter accelerated away from the battlefield, Marcus felt a satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years. The convoy was destroyed, the message was delivered, and, against all odds, he was still alive. "Retribution, this is Wanderer," Voss's voice came over the comm. "Preliminary reports are already coming in from network cells across the galaxy. Word of our victory is spreading fast. Any reactions from the major powers? The Karathi government is demanding an investigation. The Velshani are calling for increased security around their convoys. And the hegemony of Kral just canceled 3 planned operations against human settlements." Marcus smiled. "Fear. Good. Maybe now they'll think twice before attacking our people." "It's a start," Morrison agreed. "But this is just the beginning. They'll adapt, bring in more ships, change their tactics." "Let them," Marcus replied. "We'll adapt too. That's what humans do." As the network ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Cerberus asteroid field behind, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since the fall of the Federation: momentum. For the first time in 25 years, humanity was fighting back, and they were winning. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that military historians had been teaching for centuries. Never underestimate an enemy you think you've defeated, especially if that enemy happens to be human. 3 weeks after the Cerberus operation, Marcus stood on the observation deck of Sanctuary, a hidden space station built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in an uncharted system. The station had been under construction for 15 years, carved out by network engineers and powered by fusion reactors that left virtually no detectable signature. Looking through the reinforced, transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see dozens of ships docked to the station's external pylons. They weren't much to look at: converted cargo haulers, modified civilian craft, and a handful of genuine military vessels that had been lost during the chaotic final days of the Federation. But each one represented a victory against impossible odds. Impressive, isn't it? Admiral Voss joined him at the window, carrying 2 cups of real coffee, a luxury that had become increasingly rare since the fall of human space. More than impressive, Marcus replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. 3 weeks ago, we had 3 ships and 47 people. Now, 137 ships, over 2,000 personnel, and active cells on 63 worlds, Voss finished. Word of Cerberus spread faster than we anticipated. Marcus nodded. The destruction of the Karathi convoy had done more than eliminate a military threat. It had ignited something that had been dormant in the human diaspora for 25 years. Hope. Show me the tactical situation, Marcus said. They moved to the station's command center, a sophisticated facility that would have been impressive on a Federation starbase. Holographic displays showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy, painting a picture of humanity fighting back on dozens of fronts. The Karathi postponed their next 3 convoy operations, reported Colonel Kim, now serving as the network's intelligence coordinator. They're demanding additional security escorts, at least twice as many ships as they originally planned, which means they can't mount as many operations simultaneously, Marcus observed. Classic asymmetric warfare result: make the enemy's resources less efficient. The Velshani are having similar problems, added Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring alien communications. They've had to reassign ships from their own territorial defense to escort duties. Some of their member species are asking uncomfortable questions about the cost of the Terran containment protocol. Marcus studied the intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The network's operations hadn't been limited to major military strikes. Human cells across the galaxy were engaging in subtle sabotage, communication disruptions, supply chain attacks, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare. Death by 1,000 cuts. What about political reactions? He asked. Mixed, Voss replied, activating another display. The major powers are publicly committed to the containment protocol, but privately they're reconsidering the timeline. Some are suggesting a more gradual approach. Translation: they want to wait and see if we burn ourselves out. Probably. But the delay gives us time to evacuate more civilian populations and build up our forces. Marcus moved to the strategic display showing the galaxy's major shipping routes and political boundaries. Red zones marked areas of active network operations, while blue zones showed successful civilian evacuations. How many people have we moved? He asked. Almost 50,000 so far, answered Commander Torres, the network's logistics specialist. We've established new settlements in 7 systems outside the major powers' spheres of influence. Small populations, but they're defensible and self-sufficient. And our military capabilities? Morrison, now serving as the network's tactical coordinator, activated a detailed breakdown of their forces. We're organized into 12 semi-independent cells, each capable of conducting operations without central coordination. Total strength is about 2,500 personnel in combat roles, plus another 5,000 in support positions. Marcus frowned. That's still tiny compared to what we're facing. Yes, but we're not fighting a conventional war, Morrison replied. We're fighting a political and economic war. Every operation we conduct costs them money, ships, and credibility. Eventually, the math stops working in their favor. assuming we can sustain this pace of operations without getting ourselves killed. That's where you come in, Voss said. We need you to plan and coordinate our major strikes. The Cerberus operation proved that the right target, hit in the right way, can have effects far beyond its immediate military value. Marcus studied the strategic situation for several minutes, considering possibilities. Finally, he pointed to a particular system on the display. What's this? The Zarathi Memorial Station, Kim replied. It's a combined museum and research facility built on the site of the final battle of the Zarathi War. Technically neutral territory, but it's become a symbol of human defeat. Who runs it? Consortium of species that participated in the war. They use it for academic research and as a propaganda tool, proof that even the mighty humans could be defeated. Marcus studied the station's specifications. It was heavily shielded but lightly armed, staffed by civilian researchers rather than military personnel. More importantly, it was scheduled to host a major conference next month. What kind of conference? He asked. The 5th Symposium on Post-War Galactic Stability, Vasquez replied. Academic papers on the lessons of the Zarathi War, the benefits of the current political order and… She paused. The necessity of preventing human military resurgence. Marcus smiled coldly. In other words, a celebration of our defeat. Essentially, yes. Representatives from every major power will be attending, along with prominent academics and journalists. Security? Minimal. It's a civilian facility in neutral space. They're not expecting any problems. Marcus looked around the command center, seeing understanding dawn on the faces of his colleagues. How many people will be attending this conference? Maybe 300, Kim replied. But Marcus, you can't be thinking… I'm thinking about symbolism, Marcus interrupted. They want to use our greatest defeat as proof that humanity is finished. What if we use the same venue to announce that we're back? Voss was already calling up detailed schematics of the memorial station. It would be extremely high risk. The station is deep in well-patrolled space, and any attack on it would be considered an act of terrorism. I'm not talking about an attack, Marcus said. I'm talking about a demonstration. He moved to the display controls and began highlighting sections of the station. Look at the structure. The conference center is here in the central hub. The memorial exhibits are arranged around it in a ring. And here, he pointed to a specific location, the main memorial chamber containing artifacts from the final battle, including wreckage from Federation ships, Morrison said, understanding where Marcus was going. Exactly. What if, in the middle of their conference celebrating our defeat, they suddenly found themselves face to face with very much alive human warriors? You want to infiltrate the station during the conference? Torres asked. I want to take it over during the conference, Marcus corrected. Not permanently and not to hurt anyone. Just long enough to deliver a message to the galaxy. Voss activated the communication system. This would require precise coordination with multiple cells. We'd need intelligence on the station's security, detailed plans of the facility and a way to get our people inside without detection. And an exit strategy, Kim added. Because once we reveal ourselves, every military force in 3 sectors will be converging on that station. Marcus studied the tactical problem with the intensity he had once brought to planning Federation military operations. Slowly, a plan began to take shape. We don't go in as an invasion force, he said finally. We go in as conference attendees. The room fell silent as everyone processed this idea. Academic credentials can be forged, Vasquez said thoughtfully. The network has people with the right backgrounds to pass as researchers. And the station's passenger manifests are probably not heavily scrutinized, Torres added. It's a civilian facility. Security screening would be minimal, Morrison agreed. They're not expecting military infiltration. Marcus nodded. We send in small teams over a period of days posing as legitimate conference attendees. When the main session begins, we reveal ourselves and take control of the communication system. To broadcast what? Voss asked. Marcus smiled. A lesson in history, specifically the difference between losing a war and being defeated. He activated the holographic display showing the Zarathi Memorial Station. In his mind, he could already see network operatives moving through its corridors, past exhibits celebrating humanity's greatest failure. Soon, those same corridors would witness humanity's return to the galactic stage. And this time, the galaxy would remember why humans had once been the most feared warriors in known space. The Zarathi Memorial Station hung in space like a monument to defeat. its crystalline spires reflecting the light of distant stars. Built from the wreckage of the final battle that had ended human military dominance, it served as both museum and warning, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations could fall. Marcus Chen adjusted his academic robes and checked his identification one more time. According to his credentials, he was Dr. Marcus Valdez, a professor of military history from the University of New Cordoba. The papers were perfect, backed by 15 years of carefully constructed academic records and research publications written by network intelligence specialists. Final approach to Docking Bay 7, announced the shuttle pilot. Welcome to Zarathi Memorial Station, Dr. Valdez. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the station's main conference center, a massive transparent dome where 300 of the galaxy's leading academics, politicians, and journalists were gathering to discuss the lessons of humanity's defeat. What they didn't know was that 37 of their fellow attendees were former Federation military personnel. Thank you, Marcus replied, gathering his luggage. Inside the bag, carefully disguised as academic equipment, were the tools he would need for the operation. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Take control of the station's communication system during the conference's opening ceremony and broadcast a message that would change the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. The docking process was routine. Station security was minimal, a few board guards checking identification and scanning for obvious weapons. They found nothing suspicious about the middle-aged academic with the worn briefcase and the tired eyes. Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, past exhibits displaying artifacts from the Zarathi War. Here was the bridge of the Federation battleship Endeavor, preserved exactly as it had been when Zarathi psychic weapons drove its crew insane. There was Admiral Harrison's command chair, still bearing scorch marks from the energy blast that had killed him. It took considerable self-control not to stop and pay his respects to fallen comrades. The conference center was already bustling with activity. Scholars from across the galaxy mingled in the central plaza, their conversations a mix of academic jargon and political speculation. Marcus recognized several faces from his intelligence briefings. Politicians who had supported the Terran containment protocol, academics who had written papers on humanity's evolutionary limitations, journalists who had spent decades portraying humans as a broken people. Dr. Valdez, a young Altarian, approached him, her blue skin marked with the intricate tattoos that indicated her academic rank. I'm Dr. Synthara from the Institute of Xenoarchaeology. I've read your papers on pre-war human military doctrine. Fascinating work, Marcus smiled politely. Thank you. Your own research on post-conflict societal reconstruction is quite impressive. They chatted for a few minutes about academic matters, with Marcus playing his role perfectly. But even as he discussed theoretical frameworks and research methodologies, he was scanning the crowd, identifying the other network operatives who had infiltrated the conference. There was Dr. Morrison, now Professor James Morrison, an expert on asymmetric warfare theory. Dr. Kim had become a specialist in communication protocols. Colonel Torres was presenting herself as an authority on logistics and supply chain management. Each of them was a respected academic with years of publications and conference presentations to support their cover identities. Attention, conference attendees, announced a melodious voice over the station's communication system. The opening ceremony will begin in 30 minutes. Please make your way to the main auditorium. Marcus excused himself from his conversation and began moving toward the auditorium, taking note of the station's security arrangements. As expected, they were minimal. A few guards at key locations, standard sensors monitoring for weapons and explosives, but nothing designed to stop a coordinated infiltration by professional intelligence operatives. The main auditorium was an impressive space, built inside the station's central hub with a transparent dome that provided a spectacular view of the stars beyond. 300 seats arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform, with holographic displays showing the conference agenda and list of presenters. Marcus took his assigned seat in the third row, close enough to the platform to act when the time came. Around him, other network operatives were settling into their own positions, each one playing the role of an eager academic. Attending a prestigious conference, the ceremony began with the traditional recognition of the war's victims, a moment of silence, for the billions who had died during the 3-year conflict. Marcus used the time to make final preparations, checking his equipment and reviewing the plan one more time. "Welcome, colleagues, to the 5th Symposium on Post-War Galactic Stability," announced Dr. Thex Mori, the conference organizer. "For 25 years, our galaxy has enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity, built on the lessons learned from the tragic Zarathi War." Applause filled the auditorium. Marcus joined in, maintaining his cover while mentally counting down the seconds until the operation began. The human conflict demonstrated the dangers of militaristic expansion and the importance of collective security. Dr. Thex Mori continued, "By studying this period, we ensure that such destructive wars never happen again." More applause. Several speakers nodded approvingly at the reference to humanity's militaristic expansion, a euphemism for the Federation's legitimate defense of human colonies against aggressive neighbors. Today, we gather in this memorial to those lessons, surrounded by artifacts that remind us of the cost of unchecked military ambition. The organizer went on. "We begin with a presentation by Dr. Velkara of the Hegemony Institute, speaking on the psychology of defeated civilizations, long-term societal effects of military humiliation." Marcus glanced at his chronometer. 30 seconds. Dr. Velkara, a tall insectoid scholar from the hegemony of Kral, approached the speaking platform. "Colleagues, the human example provides us with a unique opportunity to study how advanced civilizations respond to comprehensive military defeat." 20 seconds. Around the auditorium, network operatives were making subtle adjustments to their positions. To any observer, they appeared to be shifting in their seats or adjusting their note-taking equipment. 10 seconds. The Federation's collapse was not merely military, but psychological, Dr. Velkara continued. "The human species has never recovered from the trauma of that defeat, as evidenced by their current status as scattered refugees." 5 seconds. Marcus stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Dr. Velkara paused mid-sentence, looking confused. Around the auditorium, 300 heads turned to stare at the human who had just interrupted the conference's opening presentation. "I'm sorry," Dr. Thex Mori said. "Dr. Valdez, this is most unusual. If you have a question, please wait for the appropriate time." Marcus smiled and began walking toward the speaking platform. "Oh, I don't have a question. I have a correction." Security guards started moving toward him, but they stopped when other figures throughout the auditorium also stood up. 37 network operatives, all simultaneously dropping their academic disguises and revealing themselves as what they truly were. Soldiers. "My name isn't Dr. Valdez," Marcus announced, his voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of a military commander. "My name is Marcus Chen, Captain Marcus Chen, Terran Federation Navy, and I'm here to give you a lesson in history." The auditorium erupted in shocked murmurs and panicked whispers. Several delegates started to rise from their seats, but Morrison's calm voice stopped them. "Please remain seated, colleagues. No one is in any danger. We're simply here to deliver a message." On cue, Kim activated a device that took control of the station's communication system. The conference's holographic displays flickered and changed, now showing the network's intelligence reports instead of academic presentations. "For 25 years, Marcus said, his voice now being broadcast throughout the station and beyond, you've told yourselves a comfortable story about the Zarathi War, that humanity was defeated, that we were broken, that we accepted our fate as scattered refugees." He gestured to the artifacts surrounding the auditorium. "You built this memorial to celebrate our defeat, to remind the galaxy that even humans could be conquered. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now." Dr. Thex Mori had gone pale. "This is an outrage. Security, arrest these terrorists." "Terrorists?" Marcus laughed. "We're scholars, remember? We're here to teach." Torres activated another device, and the auditorium's holographic displays began showing footage from recent network operations. The destruction of the Karathi convoy, successful raids on military installations, the evacuation of human civilian populations. "Lesson 1, Marcus announced. Losing a war is not the same as being defeated. The Federation fell, yes. Our government collapsed, our fleets were scattered, our colonies were abandoned. But we survived. We adapted. We endured." The footage continued, showing dozens of successful operations across the galaxy. Lesson 2. Humans don't stay down. Every species that has tried to eliminate us has learned this eventually. The Zirathi certain,